Hey everybody, how's everybody doing today? This nice bright Sunday. I'm actually doing one during the daytime. I got the garage open in the background here, and yeah, not just a beautiful day. It got pretty stormy here earlier today. Just driving up to the gas station, there was a lot of trees down along the way, and branches and stuff that were um, either run over or moved over to the side of the road. So, got Waza on here today. How are you? How are you today?
Doing good, doing good. How are you?
Not too bad. So, um, I think you're coming through the computer audio, so you should be sounding good without me even having to adjust you. Go ahead and talk for a minute, and I'll take an eye.
All right, you make me sound like a professional recording artist here, or broadcast artist. That'll be fine by me.
Yeah, that
Yeah.
looks good. Your signal levels are good, and everything's great.
All right, excellent.
So I know the other day we talked a little bit about communication stuff and how you were wanting to get into that, and coincidentally, you happened to order one of the same radios I have. So
Yeah, yeah.
you said you haven't it hasn't arrived yet, but I guess I'll let you talk a little bit. What's your I guess goal on getting into radio? What's your main concern? Of course, you've heard me talk about it a lot, but what are your
Well,
goals with it?
yeah. Well, I'll tell you that I might have mentioned it in the first one that we did when we were talking some survival issues, but that's really my main goal is to have a multi-capable form of communication that does not rely on anything more than it has to. For example, the internet or the cell networks. So that's my number one goal. Number two is to make sure that I don't have to plug it in case there's a temporary electrical outage of any kind or a not so temporary outage. I can rely on batteries. So that's nice. And then also for it to be multi capable, so I can get, weather channels and regular, I guess it's not called broadcasting, it's called transmitting, to use the proper term, right? So I can get vilified by the enthusiasts that know everything.
Yeah, and that's sort of why I like the guy that I sent you the links to, the Not a Rubicon.
Right?
He sort of
Yeah,
says you want to say whatever you want to say. Ignore.
exactly. Like when I first drove a big truck and I learned not to call it a rig or there's certain terms you have to use to be proper in the know and not be labeled a ignoramus. But anyway, yeah, the other goal with that was to be able to have a reasonable range of transmittals, so I don't have to talk only to people in my podunk town, but I might be able to extend that network to at least regional, if not beyond. And this particular one, of course, gives you the ability to listen to transmit on repeater networks, so I can tap into some further distances. It's because it FARs, get
Yeah,
lots of
yeah.
FARs.
How many FARs are you gonna get? So
Yeah,
no, yeah.
exactly.
So that's yeah, and there's just different modes. I know I sent you the link sort of on what all the different modes mean, and of course, since you've driven and stuff, you know what CB is, of course.
Right.
The old Citizens band, which I guess sort of started in a similar manner to the current GMRS. They often call GMRS CB 2.0.
Right.
But CB just it was back in the 70s, and it sort of went downhill, and a lot of foul mouth people. You couldn't even be on one without hearing the worst possible things you could possibly hear. So I
Sure.
learned
And it sort of took on a specific role for not just trucks, but people that like to travel and talk while they're traveling.
right.
It really just like if you say CB to most people, that's all they think about is having a CB radio in your truck or your car while you're moving.
Right, and I think that's more people our age, and then I guess kids these days when they still might know the term CB, but when it comes to radio, they think of the little bubble pack radios, the little FRS
Yeah, exactly.
radios. So which are basically the same as GMRS. So to sort of get into that, the FRS, the only difference between that and GMRS is one, FRS is unlicensed, but
Right.
the radios are limited, I think, to 1 watt or 2 watts,
Yeah,
um,
very.
very small. And I have a few of those radios. I've shown them on the broadcast here before. Yeah, I got one
They
here.
also have to have fixed antenna, don't they?
Yeah, it's you can't see it because I don't have you on video, but it's a little like Motorola radio. It's the basically it's just 22 channels. They have like quote unquote privacy codes, which aren't private at all. Um, but yeah, that's a topic for another time. But and then GMRS. I think the radio you bought is technically FCC wise. It's technically a ham radio, even though it will transmit on FRS, GMRS. It'll transmit on the MURS, MURS, and LMR frequencies. So it'll transmit across them, but they're not like license accepted. But really, if there was a scenario where the shit hit the fan and SHTF and you needed to use it, everything, it's no holds barred. You can use whatever you need to use to communicate
Yep.
effectively.
Who's going to bug you about your license at that point, right?
Yeah. No license necessary.
No one.
Hmm.
So yeah, it was a great way to get a very capable radio set up, and the cost was ridiculously small. I mean, the cost of the license is going to be more than the radio at this point. I forget what I paid, but it was like $60 or something.
Oh, okay. I wasn't sure if it was like 30 something or 60. Yeah, but I think I've got mine back maybe, I don't know, it's probably been 7 or 8 years ago now. And I think it was at that time, I think it was like $42. So they've gone up a little bit because they got super popular after that. Baofeng, is now usually one of the radios. Well, I think yours is called like labeled B-Tech, which is basically,
Yeah,
so that's like
I think it's
go ahead.
V2, I think.
I thought it was UV82, but yeah, it's a Baofeng, and they may have relabeled the model number too, but it's basically the same as my. Well, B-Tech is basically the sort of the American division of Baofeng, and so that's all the differences. They have a different little badge on it, a little sticker.
Hey, wait a second now. I just looked up my order, and this says it was delivered on the 23rd, which is the day before yesterday.
Hmm.
But yet, the house that it was delivered to brought me 3 packages that were delivered there, and that was not among them.
Interesting. Hmm.
Uh-oh. I'll have to check into that. But yeah, when I say V2, what I mean is second generation.
Oh, okay.
It's that's how it's labeled as second generation.
Okay, so yours might even be more capable than mine in certain areas then.
Maybe so, and it was indeed $53 total.
Okay, well that's not bad at all then. That's still
Not at all. No.
insanely cheap, for halfway decent name brand ham radio that would do something like that. They would usually, even the lower end ones would start around 150 and go all the way up to like $400. But then you start getting into some digital modes too, which fascinate me, and we can talk about that in the future cast. But that's it's like DMR modes. There's like a Yaesu Fusion, Yaesu System Fusion, YSF, and then like an ICOM D-Star mode, which are 3 different digital modes, which are really cool. The DMR is more of an old commercial standard that was repurposed or adopted, I guess, by hams, but they can hear you, I think, if you're like on a traditional radio, like the ones we're talking about, the Baofengs, they can hear you, but if they transmitted on digital mode, you would just hear like a data burst,
Oh yeah.
But eventually I want to get the DMR, because once you get that set up properly, the capabilities are amazing. You can actually create have a mini repeater that you can like put in your car. Like it's, there's different ones, but I think they're like Raspberry Pi based, and you can connect to them. Well, they actually have a receiver in them, and so for example, if I was out at the pub, I could have my radio on me. I could have the little device in my car hooked to my mobile antenna. It would pick me up and then broadcast me over the internet. If the thing was connected to the bar's Wi-Fi, it would broadcast over the internet to like people all over the country. So you can literally, from your handheld, you can talk to people in different talk groups, sort of like the police talk groups all over the country or the world even. So
That's incredible.
it
Yeah,
is.
I'll rely a lot on your knowledge to get started with that, but it's something that I'm not going to put down until I understand the capabilities and the utility of it very well.
Right.
So
And there's probably, if you get into like this radio, the next one I would suggest to get There's one I don't know the model name off the top of my head, and I'm not going to look it up at the moment. But it's a brand called Anytone, and it has basically all the same transmit specifications that you have, but it has the FM. Basically, your radio is an FM mode, and then it also has the DMR digital modes and all that cool stuff as well. I think it even has like GPS and positioning.
The picture of the radiodity that you sent me as well?
It might have been.
Orange one. It's like an orange one.
Oh no, that's just basically the same as the one you got, but it's just a newer model. But no, this one's like totally like digital mode, and you can even load in like when you get on DMR, you register for a DMR ID, so you have like a 7-digit DMR ID number. And so when you talk to somebody over DMR, if they have the database loaded, you have your number programmed into your radio, and they can see your call sign or whatever without even asking you.
Nice.
Which is sort of like your first name and your call sign or your whatever.
And just to throw it in there, I think my call sign, I'm gonna make it Pappy Jack.
There you go.
You know where that comes from?
No. Mm-mm.
That is the nickname that the guys that my grandfather used to. Well, he was their commanding officer, I suppose, in the Air Force. He was a career Air Force. He was in there till he retired, and that's what everybody called him. He gave me a great big mug that had sort of a lead top to it. It looked like one of those flagons from over in Europe that they used to use when they were drinking back in the day. And it had, it was about 12 inches tall, and it had that lead sort of a cap on top, and it had a little airplane on it. And it had a little cartoon drawing. I forget the guy's names from the old cartoons with the big floppy hat. And it had his name on there, Pappy Jack, and their battalion or whatever, contingency,
Yeah, that's cool.
That was his name, Pappy Jack.
Yeah, so
everybody under him called him Pappy Jack. Everybody at his level or above him called him Bake because his name was Baker.
Okay, I found it. It's called the new Anytone ATD878UV2 Plus.
All right.
Yeah, that's quite a big name there, and
it must be awesome with all those letters.
I know, right? So I'm playing a little clip of it here.
Hi, I'm Jonathan from Martin Lynch & Sons, and today we're going to have a look at the brand new Anytone ATD878UV2 Plus.
Yeah, it
so,
has.
As you can see, quite a simple unboxing experience. So
it has like built-in GPS, and if you set that up, like say you're in like a search and rescue situation, you can transmit your coordinates like they'll pull the coordinates. It's called APRS, Automatic Position Reporting System. So like every 30 seconds, it'll send your location to the rest of the group and stuff. So it's really good for like search and rescue capabilities. But yeah, we won't dwell too much on that. Now, another interesting thing, I had heard about it before, but I never really dug into it. There's a unlicensed data mode or data. I guess it's a networking. It's like a mesh networking capability, and it's not really fast enough for sending like files or it might be just barely good enough for like very low quality voice communications, but it's mostly sort of for text messaging and stuff like that. But it's called LoRaWAN, LORA, which stands for long range, and then WAN obviously for wide area network.
Yeah.
And so you can get these little devices that are not much bigger than like I forget what they call them, 8750 battery cells. And it has like a board on it with just a little antenna, and the software is like almost just plug and play. You just plug it in, and it'll connect to whatever nearest LoRaWAN, that's sort of a tongue twister, node that there is, and they automatically mesh together. And I think if you have just one of them, you want to have it connected. I think it has Wi-Fi built onto the board, or some of them have an Ethernet. So you always want to have like one of them in the area plugged into the internet. So, and then like say you have a big property, say you have like, I don't know, like 100 acres, you could pop a base node, which is like a gateway, and then you would put other ones, say, around your property, and then on your phone you can create there's like an app that connects you to the LoRaWAN network, and it's a lower frequency, but it's very low power transmit from the node, but it can have massive range, and it'll again connect to anybody. So like even if somebody the next town over has one, and say you're both at a high point, they'll connect like miles away even sometimes. There was a guy on YouTube that I watched that actually drove very, very far out, and even with a normal antenna, he was able to connect to a node like over 100 miles away, line of sight.
Wow, nice.
Yeah, so that's a neat one. But it was designed originally around the Internet of Things, IoT devices, like
Right.
refrigerators. I think there's even like pacemakers and hearing aids and different medical devices that can connect to that network. And again, the beauty of it is the mesh, and then even if the people are completely unknown or disparate from each other, as long as those nodes are within range, they can phone home. So over the internet once they hit a gateway. So like I mean the applications of it are just unbelievable, just unlimited application almost.
Yeah.
Yeah, so that's I think it was a crypto mining setup that used it, Helium, the Helium network, like Helium coin, and you would basically set up one of these nodes. It would operate as a LoRaWAN node, and basically the more people you connected to and the more devices that were around you, the more devices that used your Helium node and everything, the more Helium you would earn. And at one time, I think the Helium coins were up into the hundreds of dollars, and there were people. I saw one guy that was making like $19,000 a month in Helium coin from like 10 nodes.
Wow, nice.
But yeah, let's see, we've done this for about this topic here for about I don't know, 18 minutes now. Let's I guess get in a little bit into other survival
Sure.
type stuff. What else have you been working on lately?
Well, it's not necessarily something I've been working on, other than trying to figure out how to move out of the city, which you already know I'm on that, and you're helping me there as well, which I appreciate. But what I've been thinking a lot about lately is, where are we in the progression of total authoritarian control, basically on a worldwide scale? Because you and I and a lot of people already know this one world order thing has been in the works for a very long time. And now that it's becoming sort of right out in the open, I mean, they're not even bothering to hide it anymore. And if you watch things from overseas, things like the World Economic Forum talks and the Davos group, and just you can just look it up on YouTube and listen to them, and they'll tell you exactly what they're doing to you and the world right now. They'll tell it to you in plain English, plain sight, right there. It's not even being censored. They're not even worrying about putting it in terms that will kind of couch what they're doing. It's just right out in the open. The other day, I found this really nice graphic. It's called the 10 Stages of Genocide, right? And it really kind of brought to light what's going on and how far along we are. According to this graphic, of the 10 stages, we're already past stage 6. And from this point on, it's things like putting people into concentration camps and really just getting rid of people and actually murdering. And I've not really been here to try to proselytize anyone or convince anyone of anything. And at this point, it's too late. If you don't already know something's up, well, it's basically too late for you. You're gonna be swept along by what's going to happen in the next couple of years here. But people who are kind of wondering and in between right now, because they know something's up, but they're not exactly sure what's going on. They don't know who to believe, because it's a big mess. And trying to vet all the different pieces of everything that's going on all around the world for all these years is almost an impossibility for people. It takes them years and years of consistent effort to try to really understand what's happening. But I came up with a way for people to at least get a start on that this late stage in the game, if you really want to know, take a look at what their tactics are. When you say they, when I say they, you and I are talking about the same they. That group is the people behind what's going on. Today, a lot of people will say Democrats. I'm not interested in Democrats. It's not a political thing, it's not a party thing. People will say communist or they'll say socialist. I'm not interested in labels like that either. This group is way more diverse and they're way more subtle and hidden in all of the nooks and crannies of all of those labels that you can put out there. Are there Republicans that are part of this group trying to put in a new world order? Yeah, of course there are. Are there socialists? Yeah, of course there are. Are they in our country alone? No, of course they're not. This is a worldwide thing that was secretive mostly, that's now becoming very blatant and in your face. So what are their tactics? Well, there's a lot of them, but if you watch for these things and you refilter things that you've already seen and known through this lens, you'll get a better perspective. I'm just going to name them off and I'm going to go through them quickly. People can rewind this and listen to them if they're interested. But just to give a quick idea, lies and repetition. You've heard the saying, if you repeat something often enough, people will believe it. Well, guess what? That's actually true. If you look it up in cognitive science, it's called the illusory truth effect. And it absolutely works. Repeat lies often. And why do you think they're telling blatant lies to people right now? You could walk down the street or look across on the internet and find absolute proof of contradiction to the shit they're saying and talking about right on the news, right in articles in your face. Absolute contradictions. It's complete bald-faced lies. Okay, what's another one? Division. They divide people in every way, shape, and form they possibly can on the issue of abortion, on issues of race, on issues of violence.
All distractions.
They find ways to divide people in every fashion they can. Next, we got obfuscation. Well, it's easy to hide things and sort of throw a mist or a cloud over stuff so you're not really quite sure of what to think of this thing or the other. Demonization. That's part of the division tactic. They will demonize anyone they can. Right now, they've really lit on, first it was the, quote, extreme MAGA people. Now it's any MAGA people. And more recently now, it's basically any Republican.
Right.
And in general, it's anyone that disagrees with them. Okay, so
and they have the entire media behind them, pretty much the entire mainstream media.
They do. Now, another one, misdirection. They make you look over here with this thing that's happening that is such a big deal. All the while over here, the left hand, the guy behind the curtain, is setting things up to knock you down, right? So they misdirect you. Projection. This is one that really gets under my skin, especially when I hear it coming out of somebody like Hillary's mouth, is accusing everyone else on the planet, particularly their group of the day, which right now is Republicans in general, accusing them of doing the very same things that they themselves are doing.
Right. Now, let me stop you real quick right there. I mean, and it's not only even people who on the opposite side of the spectrum from them that they're accusing these things of. During the Democratic primaries, during the primaries, even there was, I think it was two, it was two Democratic candidates that Hillary specifically demonized. I think it was one that she specifically demonized. It was Tulsi Gabbard. Democrat, young, pretty. Was already like involved in politics. She had, a lot under her belt already, but just because she didn't toe the party line and agree with the mainstream Democrats, they basically put her in the same category as Donald Trump, as a Russian asset. They called her a Russian asset, and unfortunately, they destroyed her, and she was pretty much out of the race. And then the other one was an older woman. I can't remember.
They literally accused her of being a traitor.
Right.
Literally said that she was a traitor to the country. And that woman, she was a pretty high powered and very good at what she did in politics. But the thing is, she was actually in the military. She was one of the people that gave of herself to defend this country and then they accused her of being a traitor. It was just a tragic story. I love it when she's on Fox News. I'm so glad that she still gets exposure.
Oh, I
She has a
know.
chance to show people what she's really about.
I wish she would go on like the Tim Pool show or a more casual show like that and actually be a little more open, but with a longer format, like a 2 hour show. But then there was another one, Mary Ann. I can't remember her last name, but she was also a Democrat, candidate during the 2016, and there was a hot mic scene. I think was right either before, I think it was after an interview where she's like, the Democrats, they're so mean to me. She sat there like in a hot mic, just, still on the broadcast, screen. They're like, they're such mean people. And I'll have to let me find that clip. Marianne, I think it was Marianne Williamson. I think that was her name. Yeah, there we go.
This is not ringing a bell, so I won't be any help on this one.
Spiritual teacher and author. So she wasn't a politician, but she was still good. And let me find the scene where she's like, let's see, mean to me. Okay, here we go. Here we go. It has to be it.
So last week I interviewed 2020 hopeful candidate Marianne Williamson. Just after the interview, while still on camera with a hot mic, this happened.
What does it say that Fox News is nicer to me than the lefties are?
I'm sorry?
What does it say that the conservatives are nicer to me?
It's a bizarre world, man.
It's such a bizarre world. I'm such a lefty. I mean, I'm a serious lefty. But I understand why people on the right call them godless. I mean, it's like, I didn't think the left was as mean as the right. They are.
Well, I'm just right.
That pretty much, sort of covers what I was saying. Even the people on their own side are being, exercised by the hardcore, the old guard of that side of the party. But I don't like labels either, so I try not to label either side. Just try to look at the big picture, which we talked about a little bit earlier offline. So let's go back to some of your talking points and then go from there.
Yeah, I'm just going to continue to go through them quickly. Another one beyond projection is logical fallacies. They will constantly put information out there and say things that become talking points on the mainstream media that are complete logical fallacies. Anyone who's ever studied anything about formal logic will know that as soon as they introduce a fallacy into an argument, that entire argument is invalid anymore. But yet they continuously do this. Just a perfect example is the difference between correlation and causation. They will continuously is correlated with this. But correlation has almost nothing to do with causation. Just because two things are correlated doesn't mean one causes the other. For example, breathing is correlated with dying, right? So is not breathing. Does one cause the other? Well, if not breathing, probably so. But breathing, does that cause death? No. It doesn't really have anything to do with it, yet it is correlated with it. Anyway. Another one, fear mongering. Boy, there's a big one right there. Everything is always, the sky is falling with these people. Everything's always threatening someone or something. Our democracy, our way of life. They're threatening our very existence. It's an existential threat. False flags. We all know what false flags are. I'm not even going to bother to say anything about that one. That's one that you really don't want to come up because false flags are usually large losses of life and very traumatic. Emotionalism. There's number one. They catch people by their emotions all the time. It's like they learned from Jerry Springer what really gets the clicks. Well, Jerry Springer said, I get a huge audience just because it's so emotional. There's so much drama here. And now they get it. They get their own influence just by the emotionalism that they put out there. War and conflicts. Yeah, of course, that's related to a lot of other ones. Misdirection, false flags,
I guess emotionalism, that's sort of sensationalism as well, I guess.
Yeah, I mean,
Sort of like you
it,
said, like Jerry Springer, like people, like talk shows, like I forget, like the old Maury
it will bypass
Povich.
people's logical mind. It will bypass them knowing how to correctly cogitate something and discern for themselves what the importance and the reality of it is, because they get caught up in the emotion.
It shorts out their logic circuits.
It does. It totally shorts it out. It just bypasses it.
Right.
Okay. Now, control, debt control, supply control, and media control. I really don't have to explain those. Right?
Sort of
Did
like
you know?
we're all
Did you
wage
know our?
slaves.
Did you know our entire economic system, our entire petrodollar fiat system, is debt? It
Yeah,
can't
yeah,
ever. If we took every dollar that America has right now and paid it back to the people that own it, there would still be interest.
right.
We can't. By the way it's created, we cannot ever pay it off. It is perpetual debt.
Well, go break down the word mortgage, what mortgage means.
Yeah, right.
Mort literally means like death, and then I think it's
Yes.
like GAGE in Latin is like, I think it's debt, so it's like debt. So you basically pay this off until you die.
Yeah.
I mean that it's, and then you've always heard the term like a wage slave or something like
Right.
that, and no
It
matter
is
what you
exactly
do.
that.
And
Yeah.
even the student loan stuff, which I did not agree with, them writing off a lot of the student debt because
No.
maybe for very small classes of people, but not just pretty much everybody across the board. But that's getting into a whole other thing. I think pretty much what they should have done is the person chose to go to college. They chose to get the loan out. If anything, I would say maybe cut off the interest. Any interest that you've paid already, gets credited back to you, and then if you have paid them off within a certain time frame, for example, say my ex-wife, for example, paid hers off like 10 years ago, basically offer up a credit on the interest paid on that, like a tax credit, just to help offset it a little bit because the interest can get pretty absurd. And so as long as they're paying back the principal, what they borrowed and used, then I think that's the way it should have been done. And then be a little more lenient on the payback terms.
I see.
There's just a number of things they could have done to where they still could have recouped the money back into the treasury without having to have me and you and it was a sort of a thing going around that pretty much like every American who never decided not to go to college and never went to college or couldn't afford to go to college is now paying off the student debt of people who did, which is not fair. So. Keep going.
Well, yeah, I'm right at the end now. One of the last things that's really quite important now because they're taking more and more advantage of it is skirting the checks and balances that are built into our system. Two of the greatest things about our constitutional republic, and by the way, people, it's not a democracy. I hope you all understand the difference. And every time they say you're threatening democracy, they're threatening to destroy our democracy. First, understand what you're talking about. This is not and never has been a democracy. It is a constitutional republic. Okay. Skirting the checks and balances is undermining one of the, if not the most fundamental reasons that it's such a great system. Listen to Anton Scalia. There's a clip of him talking about what everybody thinks is great about the American democratic system. And he says that they constantly bring up the Bill of Rights. Well, you know what? The Bill of Rights is a great thing. And those points really did need to be spelled out and agreed on. I'm glad they were able to fight for the inclusion of the Bill of Rights. But most importantly, fundamentally, is the prevention of the consolidation of power. Decentralization of power among three branches of government. It is excruciatingly important because what happens when one group gets total control? We all know the answer to that. It's obvious. Everyone knows the answer to that.
We're going through that now, somewhat.
Why can't we see that happening right now? They are fighting like hell to get rid of the decentralization of power. They're demonizing the Supreme Court. That's the legislative branch, right? They're promoting
Judicial.
the executive branch, or yeah, judicial. Sorry, they're promoting the executive branch and trying to give the president all the power, and they're trying to make him rely on skirting the checks and balances by exercising the so-called what is it, executive
And the executive orders, yeah.
yeah, executive orders. Well, that's dangerous as well. And then what are they doing to the remaining branch? What do we have? The legislative branch, right? What are they doing to that? Well, nothing. They're letting it sit there. They're trying to get control over the houses of the government so that they can control the legislative branch. So that's kind of the subtle one, because every politician wants that. The Republicans want to control all the houses, and the Democrats want to control all the houses. Why? Because they can get more shit done, of course.
Yeah, yeah.
So
And unfortunately, they're really not. Well, fortunately, right now, from my political persuasion and everything, there's enough. When it comes to the Senate, there's two Democrats in particular, Joe Manchin from West Virginia and Sinema. I forget where she's from, but they're Democrats. But typically, when it comes to like a really big vote on something, they're usually the ones that cross the party line and keep it from going through. And that's why, a lot of the Democrats now in the Senate want to change the rules of the Senate again to make it so you need a supermajority, like a 60% or 60 vote to pass it instead of 51, or to knock it down. Either way. So again, they're trying to change the rules because they can, because they have the Senate, they have the House, so they're trying to change the rules to make it even more for them, and make it impossible for anything to get done. Right now, I mean, it's I guess even though the Democrats still hold the two lower houses or whatever, they still I guess it almost makes Biden a lame duck president, and he will be hopefully after the November thing.
He was nothing more than a puppet to begin with. So
right, like who's really running it? It can't be Kamala.
Well, it's funny. It's funny because I've seen not just on Fox but a few other good sources where they are actually asking that very question now. They're finally starting to say, "Well, who's running this show? Who's giving him his orders?" Because how many times have you heard Biden say things like, "Oh, I'm not supposed to talk about that. Oh, they won't let me answer these questions.
Right.
Oh, I'm going to get in trouble for that." For Christ's sake, man, you're the president.
And they brush it off. The media brushes it off as like he was joking or just, just making good humor about it.
He was just talking about his advisors, that they're. No, listen, you're the president. Did you ever once hear Trump or any other strong president say something like that?
No.
Not that they were a strong one. I think I heard George Jr. a few times say something like that.
But for him, you sort of knew who was behind him, and that was Dick Cheney.
Yeah, of course.
And Daddy Bush.
Not to mention Daddy Bush, right, of course. And he was weak to begin with, and everybody could see it. They knew it. As soon as he opened his mouth and started talking, I just heard weakness in his voice, not to mention his demeanor.
Well, he was probably expecting a very, calm presidency until he got thrust into 9/11, and that changed everything. So,
yep.
I mean, I did read his book back after he was out of office, and I do give him some kudos. Unlike Obama and even unlike Trump, during the supposedly during the whole 9/11 and the war thing, and while all that was going down, I mean, he did say, he stopped playing golf. He didn't do it anymore. He had too much to do, but of course, Obama, when he got in, I forget how many times he was out golfing, and of course Trump did too. And that's sort of a trivial thing to say, but I do give him some props for at least being in his office and actually working. And same with Trump. I mean, even though, Trump was sort of an oddball. I mean, he was up at all hours of the night tweeting and, but that's what made Trump so much fun in a way. He would just sort of like Elon Musk and a handful of other people. He spoke his mind. It wasn't going through a filter. It wasn't coming from some press manager or whatever. You knew it was coming from that person, and that made it all that much better, that you were actually hearing directly from those people, and not being filtered through God knows who.
Well, that's really all that I had on my list. I just wanted to try to bring to people's mind what to watch for if they're wondering just what the hell is going on here. If they're looking around going, wait a minute, this isn't how things are supposed to be. There's something really wrong here. If they're waking up to that point, then these are the things to look for. Follow the money, listen to some of the things I just listed, and watch more than one news source. Please don't watch the mainstream news unless it's to be informed on what they're trying to tell you. But even something as simple as switching to Fox News, I don't want to say Fox is the greatest thing in the world. They are not by far, but it's a much better news source than the mainstream media would have you believe.
Yeah,
And
and just
I'm glad to see that they're taking number one on a lot of things, which is really heartening, I think.
and then just for people out there who are who may be more to the left and they're just saying, oh, he's just saying Fox News, because that's society's on or whatever. Let me add a few more. You have people like Tim Pool that I talk a lot about. Tim Pool was traditionally a lefty guy, on the left, and he still is. He's still like registered Democrat. He's still left, but him and Elon Musk both have said that the Democratic Party left me behind. I'm still the same person I've always been, on the left with the same beliefs, but the party has moved so far and shifted so far to the left that they basically fall into having similar beliefs as the people on the right now, and that's why they've sort of changed their tone. But they're still Democrats, So I look to Tim Pool because he's probably one of the biggest now independent media things, and they have a couple shows. They only do he does little clips throughout the day, covering daytime events, and then they have a 2-hour show at night, and then if you're a member, there's like a 45-minute after show. But that's the one I recommend. Fox is good, and there's a couple other ones, but Tim Pool, I highly recommend, him, and he gets people from both sides on the show, and it's just a lot of fascinating people. So.
Yeah, there's plenty of them out there, and I didn't by any means. In fact, I think you heard me qualify my statement that Fox News, although it's good, is certainly not by any stretch the best, not by a long shot. But the point there being that people need to seek out some kind of balanced information, because like I said before, this is not a partisan thing. You can throw Democrat and Republican out the window. It's not accurate enough to really understand what's going on to divide it into the Democrats and the Republicans. You also can't even divide it into, I tried for a while to label them extreme Democrats or the socialistic Democrats, or trying to put some label as in a subgroup of the Democrats of really, they're the ones that they're off on a tangent. But it's even beyond that. It's more fundamental than that.
Yeah, the next war will be between the Antifa and the Proud Boys. Yeah, go ahead. You said more fundamental than that.
No, that's really all I had to say, okay. And that's the entire thing that we kind of went off on this particular line of discussion. That's really all I had to say. I just wanted people to, if they're waking up to the point that they know something's wrong and they don't quite understand it, there's the things to look for. Find yourself some good sources that are showing you some balanced and factual information. Check it and try to stitch it together for yourself. It's not hard to do at this point. It's so blatant now. All you got to do now, you can even just listen to some of the people who are in that group, just talk like those Davros, the meetings for the Davros group.
Right.
Watch some videos from that, and you'll get the idea.
And even one that I didn't bring up when you first started your list, when I brought it up on the screen here, the World Economic Foundation, Klaus Schwab, and all those guys.
Yeah. That was one I think I mentioned as well, the WEF.
Yeah, you will own nothing and you will be happy.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly.
I mean, that's good if that's my choice. Like if I want to become a minimalist or go live in a tiny house out in the woods or whatever, that's my choice to do. But I don't want. I don't want them telling me that.
That's not their idea of you will own nothing and be happy.
Right.
Their ideal with an L, their ideal behind that statement is that we will own everything and we will tell you what you can have and cannot have, and we will control every aspect, and you will be happy because we know better than you and we can do better than you.
Yeah, it's real
That's
black.
the ideal behind that. Living out in nowhere off the grid by yourself, that's completely different thing.
Yeah, and they don't want that. They don't want you to be
No,
independent, you know.
hell no, they don't want that because they can't control you.
They want you to
They
be
can't
renting out their BlackRock owned houses, and you know, I mean, they
they
want.
can't control your biological energy in terms of your work and your output and your effort. They can't control your electrical grid and the money that they can get from that and the power they can wield over it. They can't control your food sources. None of those systems of control that I named in that list that we were talking about just a bit ago, debt control, supply control, media control, all of those go out the window if you're living by yourself off the grid. You know, about 25 years ago, when I first started really looking in deeply into some of these things, I read a book, and I'm not going to go into the details who it was or what book it was. This man decided he was going to go off the grid. And it was an account of what it took for him to transition from a city dweller like me to being out off the grid on a land that he owned, completely self sufficient,
Right.
not connected to anything, totally self sufficient. And he said it took him about 3 years to get there, okay, which blew me away. I would have thought it would take longer.
Right.
And secondly, once he got there, his entire life amounted to about 4 hours of chores every day.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's what he had to do to maintain his own self sufficiency.
You know, like
About 4 hours a day. What was he
firewood,
doing?
water, stuff
Oh, he
like
was
that.
chopping wood, carrying water,
Hunting, foraging.
tending his garden. You know, just simple things like that. About 4 hours a day. Not even backbreaking labor. And he was totally and completely self sufficient within 3 years on 4 hours a day.
That sounds fun. It sounds like an
And
attractive thing.
that right there really woke me up because I was at that time I was putting nearly 80, well, in some cases regularly putting in 60, 70, and 80 hours a week in work. I was fairly well paid for it, but I had no life.
Yeah. Yeah. And I don't, and
And
I don't know that guy's story, you know, specifically. I know I did have one German fellow that I know tell me that, you know, yeah, you can move out there and be as self-sufficient as possible, but unless you're literally like cutting your own wood, milling your own wood, you know, making your own containers and forks and spoons, like in everything. Um, you know, at some point you still will need to come into society and depend on society for certain things. You know, I mean, like medicine or, but again, you know,
yeah,
some people don't. You know, some people do natural remedies. Some people will have a wood mill and be able to mill their own wood to build their structure and not have to buy wood from a Lowe's or whatever.
sure.
But you know, the vast majority of people, you know, I guess you still will need to either be able to make something to sell it to earn money to buy those little things,
Yep.
those incidentals you need, or you can work a remote job now with like the Starlink capability.
Yeah.
You know, work remotely. And still have an income of some kind, but
Yeah. I
you'll
mean,
still be ready when things fall. So, you know, to sort of wrap it up, we're getting, well, I haven't edited this yet, but we're getting close to an hour on the record time. I guess you know, from your perspective, you know, I've talked a lot about my own view here on this channel in previous videos, you know, that have been done on my own. But what do you see maybe in the next, you know, you can, depending on who gets elected or what party takes over, if it even matters, with the globalists we've talked about, what do you see coming down maybe like the next like 2 to 4 years?
well, that's a good question. And in my opinion, the short answer is since you can't label it Republican, Democratic, or an American thing or whatever, it's a total global effort. These things are going to happen. The supply chains are going to fail. The financial system is going to fail, and there's no avoiding these things. And it's getting to the point now where it's 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 crunch time. If you're not prepared by now, you're not going to be prepared. You don't have enough time. Now, I'm not trying to be alarmist. I'm not trying to say the whole world's going to fall apart, but a large portion of these structures are going to fall apart. And the people who want control are not going to get control. So, what's going to happen is you're going to find the government's failing. In the United States, the way it's going to happen is the eastern portions and the western portions will factionalize, the central portions will factionalize. As the national government falls, the states will start to take control. You already see people migrating. They're already migrating to the places where they know that they're more comfortable and it's closer to their own belief systems. I mean, look how many people have left California and how many people were entering Florida. That's just
Well,
one
Florida
simple
and
example.
Texas, Texas
You know,
is,
there's a
Texas will
lot more.
probably be a country on its own,
But the point being, national governments are going to fail. There's no way around that. And it's going to cause a lot of chaos on all levels of life. And people are going to have to reorganize and hopefully in the process reorganize in such a way that that centralization of power cannot happen again. If they don't work that into the restructuring, then we're just looking at the same situation 50 or 100 years from now, looking at the same thing.
Right.
And that's my short answer to that. That I don't know how else to put it, and I can't put it kindly, and I don't want to sound alarmist, but that's what you need to be prepared for.
No, I agree with you, pretty much wholeheartedly. Like you said, it would be sort of an eastern-western divide. Probably a plains divide. The plains would be smart to,
Yeah.
go out on their own because they have a lot of leverage because they're the breadbasket, of the country. So they have the leverage of food. Now there'll probably be battle fought over, who controls the mid portion. But I think Texas will probably be, in my opinion, a standalone country. And since they have a lot of military bases, they'll be a very powerful new country.
Well, look how long they've been trying to secede.
Right. So the Texas will probably defend a lot of the mid, the Great Plain states and sort of keep that neutrality, hopefully, between them. So it's going to be interesting times. I mean, there was one show that I watched called Jericho, where it was basically a nuclear quote unquote attack, and
I've seen some of it.
Yeah, without spoiling the show too much, anybody out there who may be listening who hasn't seen it, you come to find out pretty quickly that it wasn't a foreign power that nuked the United States. It was actually an inside job.
False flag.
Yeah, false flag, but they basically knocked out all the power and everything. But eventually, over the course of the show, the country got broken up into those similar factions, and then Texas was sort of the place everybody wanted to be because it was the last free bastion.
Before recently, when I've considered moving to your area, I was considering mostly north central Texas.
Yeah, and who knows where we'll go? I mean, that's one area that I have thought about myself.
Yeah.
But well, I think we've had a good one here. I'll probably edit it and cut it up here a little bit. Try to get it posted up tonight if I can. But insert some of the talking points and pictures and so on. But yeah, anything else you want to say to close out?
Not really. Just be prepared. People get some stocks of food and water, however much you can do. I think a minimum of 6 months is good, preferably more like 3 years.
Yeah, never have
The one
have
other
too
thing
much.
I would mention is your money. If you can take much of your money out of the banks and out of your accounts of various kinds and purchase things like that so you don't have to do a lot of work, just do it. If you're not prepared, you're going to be sorry. If you are prepared and absolutely nothing happens, what's the worst that you've done? You've
Right.
tossed a little bit of money into something that's still going to be useful. But if it's the other way around, it's like insurance. In fact, it's exactly like insurance. It's survival insurance.
There
Think
you
of it
go.
that way.
Yeah, exactly. Okay, well, sounds good. We'll try to do these a little more often. I know we've been sort of, passing each
Yeah,
other. So, but
let's do it.
let's try to do at least one a week, and maybe two if we have a lot to talk about. So, okay, well, I'm going to go ahead and bring it on down here. It was good to do another one. We'll, everybody have a good rest of your Sunday and a good coming week. And we'll go.
Good talking to you.
Yeah, take care.